Hi, my name is Morgan and I am a neuroscience researcher, but more importantly, I am a woman who exists within the realm of STEM and who does research and has been mentored by other women. And if you can't see where this video is going by the title of it and that statement, today we're going to talk about that paper, that one. So if you're anywhere near the scientific community, you've probably heard of this paper that was recently published in Nature Communications. On November 17th, the paper called The Association Between Early Career Informal Mentorship and Academic Collaborations and Junior Author Performance was published in Nature Communications. I, in this beginning part of this video, will probably be reading a lot off my screen because I have a lot of direct quotes because I don't want to misrepresent any of the research or possibly be accused of that. But as I get further on, I'll discuss my opinions and my thoughts. I thought I would add into the discourse on this subject. So this paper was published by 3 authors. I cannot pronounce any of their names, so I will list them all here. But I think it was really interesting to see that 2 of them are women, and I will never understand how women are able to tear other women down like this or represent women this poorly, but they did. I'm also a little bit ashamed because Nature Communications is an open access journal, and I did a video a couple weeks ago, I'll link it up here somewhere, about open access journals and how important they are and how open access journals are doing their best to fight the amount of misinformation that's out there by making information available to the public. Open access journals are ones that are free to access to everyone, but this is the opposite of combating misinformation. This is blatant misinformation and blatant sexism that is, I feel awful to have ever promoted it. The one good thing that I've seen come out of this paper is that there's been an absolute outcry of women and our allies on all different social medias, but I've mostly seen it on Twitter, just shouting out their female mentors and how they've been impacted by women in STEM and the amazing bond between female-female mentor-mentee pairings. And that's been beautiful and wonderful to see. There's also a bunch of petitions to get the paper retracted, and I will of course link those in the description if you feel like signing those. I mean, make your own judgment for yourself, but I think myself and most other reasonable scientists agree that this was not a good paper and should not have been published. So in case you were unaware of the paper or you haven't had the time to read it for yourself yet, I'm going to give a brief summary of the paper so that everyone watching this has some context. This is just going to be a summary. I will get onto my comments of everything that's said later. I just want to lay down a brief what this paper claims to have found. So the paper claims to have been looking at informal mentorships in scientific collaborations. And they did this by going through a database of publications and looking at the first time that someone published and who they published with then, and then going through to 7 years down the road. Between 1 to 7 years of their first publication, they were considered a junior scientist, and after 7 years, they were considered a senior scientist. Their first finding is something that's pretty well known at this point. It's been really well demonstrated. It's due to sort of implicit bias. People who publish with bigger names, or like people who are big names in the field or are at big name universities, are more likely to get more publications later on. This has been studied by a lot of different people, and I think what we've decided it boils down to is just the biases towards these universities and towards these people. If you publish with someone who's really well known in the field, then you get your name associated with theirs, and then you're more likely to be listened to. Their second finding is the one that has been so controversial and has caused all of these issues. And essentially what they claim to have found is that women who are mentored by other women don't perform as well, and women who mentor women also don't perform as well. So essentially women working with women does not lead to good performance on either part. I'll get onto that. I want to quote the paper real fast just to, again, make sure I'm not misrepresenting anything. I am presenting this paper as they wrote it. I'll put the paper up here so you can read along with me or see where I'm getting this from. They said, "We also find that increasing the proportion of female mentors is associated not only with a reduction in post-mentorship impact of the female proteges, but also a reduction in the gain of female mentors. While current diversity policies encourage same-gender mentorships to retain women in academia, our findings raise the possibility that opposite-gender mentorships may actually increase the impact of women who pursue a scientific career. These findings add a new perspective to the policy debate on how best to elevate the status of women in science. So they said that they analyzed this from the perspective of male and female mentors, but they don't really mention males unless it's to say that the males had better performance than the females. So that bit was as far as being mentored by a man or a woman. Which one should you consider more? This is about mentoring women or men. These results suggest that by mentoring female instead of male proteges, the female mentor compromises their gain from mentorship and suffer on average a loss of 18% in citations on their mentored papers. As for male mentors, their gain does not appear to be significantly affected by taking female instead of male proteges. So lastly, they tried to kind of justify their paper and justify their findings. I believe this was in response to one of the reviewers. I'll also get onto the reviewer comments later. In peer review, you have people peer review your paper, and typically those are taken into consideration, but it seems that in this case they weren't really, so I believe they added this in to satisfy one of the reviewers, but it doesn't satisfy anything. While it has been shown that having female mentors increases the likelihood of female proteges staying in academia and provides them with better career outcomes, such as studies often compare proteges that have a female mentor to those who do not have a mentor at all, rather than those who have male mentors. Our study fills this gap and suggests that female proteges who remain in academia reap more benefits when mentored by males rather than equally impactful females. The specific drivers underlying this empirical fact could be multifold, such as female mentors serving on more committees, thereby reducing the time they are able to invest in their proteges, or women taking on less recognized topics that their proteges emulate, but these potential drivers are out of the scope of the current study. Our gender-related findings suggest that current diversity policies promoting female-female mentorships, as well intended as they may be, could hinder the careers of women who remain in academia in unexpected ways. Female scientists, in fact, may benefit from opposite gender mentorships in terms of their publication potential and impact throughout their post-mentorship careers. So that's what the paper has to say on women mentoring women, and it's just a lot to unpack. I think they had some meaningful findings, seeing that women who are mentored by other women are published less often. But I think the conclusion to that should be, hey, what are we doing wrong to where women aren't as represented as men, rather than, oh, women, if you would like to be acknowledged, you should be mentored by men and you should mentor men, because that's just going to lead to men. Like, it's not going to help women at all. So like I said earlier, this paper was published on November 17th. On November 19th, there had been such an outcry of support for women and also support for retracting this paper that Nature Communications published a little editor's note on the paper saying that it was under review and under investigation for some of the statements it made about gender. But along with that, they released the reviewers. So normally whenever something's peer reviewed, you don't really get to see what the reviewers had to say about it. But in this case, I guess maybe to defend themselves, they released the reviewers' comments, and the reviewers had a lot of the same complaints that are being issued now, which is what's kind of interesting about it, because typically your reviewers have some say in whether or not you get published, and it doesn't sound like these reviewers would have agreed to publishing this. So here are some arguments that the reviewers had. First of all, the authors conflate mentorship with authorship. So the way that they figured out the success of the mentorship was how many authorships this person got and who the person was a co-author with. And that doesn't necessarily mean anything. So, like, for example, I have a paper right now that's been submitted for publication, and there's someone on it who I spoke to once. By the logic of this study, they mentored me. And they didn't even really teach me anything. We just had one Skype call to discuss the paper, and that was it. So why in the world would you ever consider them a mentor of mine? Also, there's plenty of people who mentor you along the way who don't get credited on your papers because they mentor you in aspects that don't have to do with your study. A lot of the other grad students I'm with have mentored me, but they're not going to get on my papers because it didn't have to do with publishing. It just had to do with surviving grad school. There's also a lot of times people will sort of lend themselves to a paper. So if there's someone who's a big name in a field and they support your paper, they'll let you put them on there as an author. That way your paper gets more attention. Or maybe they'll give you some equipment, and then to sort of repay them, you put them on there as an author. And so that doesn't mean that they mentored you at all. It just means that they let you use their name, or they let you use their funding. So authorship isn't mentorship. They also said that they were looking at informal mentorships, but if you're only looking at authorships, you can't know if it's an informal mentorship or not, because like your PI for your graduate advisor, the person who determines whether or not you get your PhD, the person who helps you get your PhD, they would be on all of your papers, but that's a formal mentorship. You also can't know if maybe the university had some sort of policy to not force mentorships, but sort of like make older faculty members mentor younger faculty members, and therefore that would be a formal mentorship, but you would have no way of knowing that if you're looking at this database. Also, I do not know much about this, but a lot of people who know more than me have said this, that the database that they used for this is extremely flawed. The database that they used oftentimes will miss authors on a paper. It also judges gender based on the first name of the author, which there's a lot of issues with. There's a lot of people who have names that aren't gendered a specific way, gender neutral names, or there are people who may be trans, and so their current name doesn't reflect who they are. There are people who are non-binary, so their name isn't going to reflect the gender either way. Or there's just people, I've noticed a trend of naming girls boy names. There's people like that, so it's not at all accurate. And then lastly, a couple of the reviewers pointed out that part of the issue with analyzing things like this is that men have historically had more privileges than women at universities, and therefore had more access to fundings and more access to resources that students and mentees needed. So you can't really compare the two whenever women are just now gaining any sort of authority in academia. How could we possibly be compared to that? So going off of that, there's been historically a lot of bias in publishing. So a lot of people who haven't tried to publish a paper before aren't necessarily aware of this, but there's a lot of politics around who gets their name put on a paper. For example, if you're an undergraduate student and you have done research in a lab and your research contributes to a paper, your mentor doesn't have to put you on that paper. There's nothing forcing them to. If you get a good mentor, they will, because that's going to help your career, and you contributed to the data, so therefore you should be an author. But there's a lot of mentors who would disagree that since you're an undergraduate, you should just be grateful to be in their lab and to have done anything at all. So they won't put undergraduates on their papers. And then also as a graduate student, if you maybe assist another graduate student with their project, you help them analyze some data, you collect data, they might put you on their paper if they're nice or if they want to, but they don't have to. And so there's a lot of negotiating that goes along with getting your name put on a paper. And then there's a lot of negotiation around the order of the names, because the order of the names of the authors on a paper matters a lot. And there have been studies that have shown that women are less likely to get credited on papers. We're less likely to be included in that. Someone who would normally include their undergrads in their papers might not include a female undergrad. So there's a lot of bias against putting women on your paper. And then your paper is less likely to get published if it has a woman author. There's a bias amongst peer reviewers, both male and female, against publishing papers written by women. So there's two factors outside of women being bad mentors that can show why you would have less publications if you had a female mentor. Women are also less likely to be cited. So if you have a feminine sounding name, your paper is less likely to get cited, which is just obvious bias. And then lastly, there's been a lot of studies that have shown that women have to shoulder more responsibilities in academia than men, that we're required to take on more family duties at home, even though that should be a 50-50 split. And then we go to work and we're shouldered with more committee meetings and with more different outreach projects than male mentors. And then lastly, you are more likely to get funding if you have a masculine sounding name. So women are likely to have less funding than men, and so we're not able to provide the same things to our students. These are all reasons that the paper could have cited for why women published less, and they didn't. And instead they drew the conclusion that females should aim to be mentored by males and that females should mentor more males. And then, like the paper itself said, there are reasons why it's beneficial to have a female mentor. There have been studies that have shown that having a female mentor does make you more likely to stay in academia, to stay in research, to continue on to your PhD or your master's or whatever postgraduate education you want to go into. There was a study done on engineering students that showed that women who were assigned a female mentor experienced more belonging, motivation, and confidence, better retention rates, and had greater aspirations. And that's not a coincidence. Women being mentored by women is a beautiful thing. It's amazing. And it really, really does help us in a male-dominated field. To be mentored by someone who knows what you're going through, has gone through it themselves, knows which faculty members you should watch out for, which ones you should avoid because of their blatant sexism. You need female mentors in your life as a young woman in STEM. And mentorship is not the same thing as co-authorship. Authorship is important in academia, but that's something we're trying to break away from because it's not all that there is to research, and publishing isn't everything, but currently it is kind of seen as such. But mentorship is so much more than that. I have known people in labs that publish papers seemingly every week, that publish papers constantly, but they weren't happy. They didn't enjoy doing research. They really wanted to get out, or they really wanted to go into industry instead of staying in academia. Mentorship is more than just telling someone how to do research or coming up with a project for someone. Mentorship is, my mentors have taken me to conferences. Going to your first conference is such an inspiration to keep going on your research journey, but they don't have to take you to those. I've had mentors who have talked to me about having a family while you're doing research, which is not my plan personally, but I know to women who want to start a family while doing research, that is extremely important, and I've never seen a male mentor do anything like that. And I've had women help me through times whenever male professors were showing blatant sexism. I've had a male professor before tell me that he wouldn't take me into his lab because I might get pregnant. I've seen male mentors refuse to let women work with animals because they believe that somehow our menstrual cycle will mess with the animal behavior, which has been... Unfortunately, there are studies to show that that's wrong because women have had to do that in the past. So there's a lot of times where males won't let us in. And so we need the women who have managed to break down that barrier just a little bit to help us go forward to break it down a little bit more. And the more that we can break down that barrier, the more we can let in more women. But saying that women should be mentored by men can be great mentors. I'm not going to say that they can't be great mentors to women. My graduate advisor is a man, and he's amazing, and he supports women, and he listens to our stories, and he defends us, and he helps us. But he's the first male mentor that I've met like that. So it's not common to see that in a man in STEM. I'm also not here to say that female mentors are the amazing unicorns that we need, that are always super helpful and wonderful. I've definitely met women in STEM who very much have the attitude of, well, I had to deal with it, so now you do too, and I had to deal with the sexist mentor, and so you can do it. I don't know why you're coming to me. But they're the minority. So if you have to deal with a majority sexist men or a minority sexist women, I'd rather take the odds of getting a sexist woman than a sexist man. I just wanted to end this video by talking a little bit about my female mentors, because I think it's important that we all acknowledge them right now, because I cannot imagine if I were mentoring someone right now and then a paper came out saying that because of my mentorship, they're less likely to succeed. And because I'm mentoring a woman, I'm less likely to succeed. That has to be so disheartening. And there's already so much disheartening things that happen in academia. Your experiments fail, you have students who don't respect you, different things can happen to you throughout the day, and then you come home and you read something like this. So to give a little shout out to my female mentors, I don't feel comfortable putting their faces just out on the internet without asking their permission first, so I'm not going to do that. But I have had 3 women, and the very first woman who I worked under was an amazing woman, and she was a single mom who managed to still do amazing research, be in the lab just as often as she needed to, and be an amazing mom at the same time. And she was so caring and loving. And whenever I was in her lab, I was in a really, really awful place. I was in high school being bullied constantly, not being accepted by my peers, and she created a safe environment for me in the lab where I could go and just do research and just escape everything that was happening. And if that would have been a man, I don't know that the same would have happened, because the men typically view more as a worker than a lab member. Lab members are so much more than just workers. They're your mentees, they're your proteges, they are people that you are meant to help and meant to inspire to go into STEM. And from what I've seen, male mentors typically don't have that attitude as often as women, and I don't know that they would have done the same. I don't know that I would still be in research today if I had gone to a male mentor. The next woman that I was under was during my undergraduate experience, and she was equally as amazing. She was in the lab constantly. She was super helpful. She answered every question I could have possibly asked, and I know I must have asked her a million because I had no clue what I was doing in undergrad. And she was just so great, and she's the one who took me to a conference with her. You don't have to take undergrads to conferences, but she knew that that would be a great experience for me, and it was so inspiring to see other people in my field. And I went to so many talks about women in STEM that were just so inspiring and so needed. And then my last mentor was also a woman. She was my boss while I was a lab tech, and she helped me get into graduate school. She helped me whenever I was extremely concerned about going to a male mentor, but I knew that I had to further my career. He was the only one working with what I wanted to, and she helped me so much. And I know that if I ever had any problems, I could go back to any of those 3 awesome women for any reason. Having more women mentors is also extremely important for younger women. I do a lot of outreach work. That was the whole point of starting this YouTube channel. I go to high schools and give talks. I go to elementary schools. I go to science museums. I do a lot of outreach. And I think the thing that happens the most often is that all of the girls gravitate towards me. And that's not a coincidence. It's so rare as a young woman or as a little girl to see other women in science that it's sort of amazing whenever you do see it and whenever you find out that you can do it. And those boys who told you that girls aren't good at math or girls aren't good at science, they were wrong, and that girls can do whatever boys can do. And it's so upsetting that we have to defend ourselves constantly against people like this, people who are willing to just publish something and instead of saying, hey, we should help out women mentors more. There's some obvious bias that's going on. Instead of saying anything remotely helpful, just tearing down women and just telling us that not only are we bad mentors, that we can't dedicate the same amount of time as male mentors to our proteges, but also that as young women in STEM, we're a burden on our mentors, and that we're not going to help them. We're actually going to harm the people who are supposed to be helping us. Women have had to defend themselves against this since the beginning of time, since we fought to be allowed into university, since we fought to be allowed into research, we fought to become doctors. We have had to fight so hard to be able to be where we are now, and to see people still claiming that we can't be where we are, or that being where we are is harmful. It's incredibly incredibly infuriating, especially to see this published by 2 women. I mean, there was also 1 man on it. He deserves equal amount of backlash, but as a woman, I never want to tear down other women. I know what they have gone through and what they have struggled with. I have been in classes with male professors where the male professor has just absolutely trashed on women, where the male professor refuses to help his female students. He's more than willing to help males during office hours, but not females. And they had to have experienced some of this too. This isn't a unique experience. This is what most women go through. And to be able to publish something saying that we should reconsider programs that are meant to encourage female-female mentorships, that's awful, and it's going to set us back. And what is just absolutely infuriating about this is that, like I said, I've seen men turn away women saying that our menstrual cycle is going to mess with the behavior of our animals. I've seen stories of people who weren't allowed to work with cell culture because they thought that somehow our menstrual cycle would affect the cell culture. There's a lot of male mentors who will take any reason that they can think of to turn away women. And now they have a paper that says that they might suffer if they have a female mentee. There's going to be so many people who use this. Even if it's not a majority of men, still, even one person using this to justify not having women, or if one university uses this to justify ending a program that encourages women mentoring women, it's going to harm women in the scientific field so much. And I sincerely hope that Nature is going to retract this paper. I am filming this on Monday, November 23rd, and it's going to come out on Wednesday. So if they've retracted it by Wednesday, I will put that in the description to let you know. I will also have links to all of the sources that I used in this video below. That includes this paper, the peer reviewers' comments, and several articles on why this is harmful to women. There's also a couple of papers in there on how women mentoring women helps women in the scientific field, and why we should encourage programs like that, as well as links to some of the petitions to have it taken down. There's also someone who is currently collecting stories of people talking about their female mentors and how their female mentors have helped them. If you would like to contribute any story that you might have to show that women in STEM and female mentors are so appreciated and so necessary, and we need them desperately, please share your story to help them know that we need them, and they're great mentors. There's more to being a mentor than being published, and there's already known bias in publishing. So why are we using that as a standard for a great mentor? The great mentors are the ones who keep you in STEM and who help you whenever you're facing discrimination, who have your back whenever you face issues with the university, whenever you face issues with publishing, any of those things. People who teach you how to conduct research and don't just view you as another set of hands to do the research. People who are willing to explain things to you whenever you just don't understand them. People who can show you papers and sources if you need them. There's so much more to being a mentor than just publishing, and I wish the authors of this paper had seen that, and I wish Nature Communications had seen that, and I genuinely hope that the rest of the scientific community is seeing it right now. And I think, judging from the amount of backlash that I've seen, I think the majority of people do know, and that's been really encouraging. But again, even if just one person manages to use this to justify discriminating against women, it's going to set us back so far, and we've had to fight so much just to be even remotely respected in the field. To have something like this published is just disheartening. So I'm sorry for the really sad, serious video, but I was trying to think of a topic for this week, and I don't know how I couldn't do this. I think it's very relevant to what's happening right now, and as a woman in STEM, I feel an obligation to speak up about this. Also, as someone who has had female mentors and has been extremely impacted by them, I think it's important that we talk about it more. So I hope that maybe this is giving you some perspective, or at least informed you a little bit about the importance of having female mentors. If you are a woman in STEM, know that you are appreciated, you are loved, you are necessary, you are needed here. Other women need to see other women in STEM and I cannot believe this is still controversial. So, I guess in conclusion, here's the link to all of my social medias. Please like and follow or do whatever you do on YouTube. And I will see you next Wednesday with hopefully a less controversial video. Bye.